Hi again then guys, and so we've got another updated Le Mans prototype tune for you today, and this time it's for the older of the two DeltaWing models. This model is often overlooked by many people for fairly obvious reasons. It has less power, lower PP. Now incidentally, for those of you who haven't seen my other video for the updated version of the newer DeltaWing, I've put a link in the description for that. So you want your racing soft tyres. For the braking bias, we've increased the rear to 6, and I would recommend doing that on both of the DeltaWings. For the suspension, we've got it exactly the same as the newer version. We've decreased the rear springs to 1225, increased the front to 550. For dampers, we've got 1 on compression, 3 on extension, anti-roll as low as possible, camber and toe neutral. For the gearbox, very similar to the other model on the surface of things, but with a different final drive. Auto setting of 230. Round off the individual gears to 2.9, 1.8, 1250, 950 and 700 with a final drive of 2.9. For the diff, low initial torque, high acceleration and braking bias of 20. For your high RPM turbo, you want that, of course, pretty simple. For the downforce, you want the downforce set on 1000. You don't really want to go any lower than that because it doesn't actually gain you any speed and you just sacrifice handling. Traction control is, of course, turned off, as usual. And so, as I mentioned, this car is no way near as inferior or as much slower than the newer version as many people would assume. And you can understand why you would assume that. It has a lot less power, it's a lower PP, it's the older model. Surely it would be inferior. And technically speaking, yes, it is. It does have slightly less power and a slightly lower top speed. But the top speed is only 4 miles per hour slower on this model than on the newer version. And I got to wondering just how efficient the DeltaWing actually is, because many people kind of overlook this car or underappreciate it or write it off as being too difficult to drive. I can understand that, but with the right tuning you'd be amazed just how well this car handles and how competitive it can be. Now this car, I worked out earlier on today just how efficient it actually is from a performance point of view. I worked out how much speed this car actually achieves from the power which it has. So not specifically speaking aerodynamics or anything like that, just how efficient is its performance. And it works out that the newer model takes around 1.77 horsepower for every mile per hour that it can do. This model requires 1.66 horsepower for every mile per hour that it can do. That means that this model, despite being slower and less powerful, is actually more performance efficient than the newer model, because the speed that it gets from that power is actually greater in comparison. Now 1.66 doesn't mean that much. It's a very pie in the sky number that doesn't really mean anything in the long run unless you have something to compare it to. So I compared it to something. I compared it to what is by far the fastest car in the game, the vehicle that you would assume surely is the most performance efficient. The Tomahawk X. 2700 horsepower and around 450 miles per hour depending on tuning. But if you do the math on that car, it requires 6 brake horsepower to achieve every single mile per hour that that car can do, compared to 1.6 horsepower per mile per hour on this car. So this car is literally around 3.7 times more efficient than the Tomahawk. It's more efficient than the Red Bull, it's more efficient than the Audi Streamliner. It may even be the most performance efficient vehicle in the game. So pretty impressive. I think the second closest thing to the DeltaWing is the Chaparral Vision Gt car, because it has the same top speed regardless of how much you reduce the power by. So it's pretty close between the two, but obviously that isn't a real working car, whereas these are. So in terms of performance, this suffers from the same glitch as the other DeltaWing. If you haven't seen that video, what I'm referring to is the fact that for some reason, and I think it's something to do with the hill making the engine overrun on the other side of the track, but for whatever reason, this car is faster on this side of the track than it is on the other side. On the other side, you'll have noticed it was cruising at about 258, 259-ish. On this side, it does 264, which is incidentally only 4 miles per hour slower than the newer model. So it's a brilliant little car, severely underappreciated, and the more you look into the car's design, just the more amazing it is. It's such an efficient little performance car. So if you haven't tried either of the DeltaWings, I'd recommend trying either of them. They're both brilliant in their own way. And if you're new to the channel, or just found this helpful or interesting in general, feel free to subscribe. I put out new updated tunes like this pretty regularly now, and new top speed tunes every day, regardless of whether they're updated or not. And as always, thanks for watching.